Question and answer period now, Professor. Question and answer period?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome back. So it's over to question and answer periods now. I drew a little quick diagram here to summarize what we concluded from the earlier lectures. This is the interest rate spread here, and we have the bid price and the offer price. Sorry, the bid interest rate and the offered interest rate. The offered interest rate is determined by arbitrage between the bond and the stock market. That is to do with marginal productivity or space. And the bid interest rate is to do with the arbitrage between present versus future goods, i.e. present meaning gold coin and future goods meaning bonds. And that's to do with time. So you've got space and time combined in one description. And to close it, you have the market maker in between. So that's just a quick summary picture in case anyone's unclear. So questions? Louis.
My question is about the market maker. In your model, Professor, does the market maker play any other role or plays just that role? Or does it matter if he plays other roles?
Probably not.
Probably not?
Probably not.
The reason I bring it up is I remember distinctly congressional hearings when the head of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and etc. were being questioned about enormous amount of losses, of course, that occurred because they were being bailed out with taxpayer money. They wanted explanations. And one line of questioning was to Goldman Sachs, who claimed that as a market maker, they could sell to their clients certain fixed interest securities and do the opposite behind the scenes as a market maker, and claim that that's what a market maker does. Now, the question to you is, do you agree? And second, do you think because Goldman Sachs is more than just a market maker, they're a fund manager as well, they're a banker as well, so they wear many hats. Don't you think that they should disclose that they might take the other side of the trade of what they recommend their clients to do? Or because they're a market maker, it's all okay? Comment, please.
Well, I think you have to be much more knowledgeable about the actual nitty-gritty of the markets than I have. I'm following, of course, the things, and I realize that these big banks played an enormously important role in the what?
GFC, Global Financial Crisis.
Yeah. And of course they are to a very large extent responsible for what's happening. But I look at it as as a process spread over a longer period of time. I can't think of it that within a year or so there is some conspiracy, some graft, some corruption, and then as a result we GFC happens, and then we blame it on Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or somebody else. So I think if I'm looking for scapegoats, I would probably say it goes back all the way to 1971. And this was in the brewing. In the history of economics of the past 40 years, it's just extraordinary, and everybody who was in influential posts, especially during the past few years, bears a responsibility for the country. It did a great deal of damage. Now, what you say that the market maker could have several roles to play, and I would add to it, yes, and in itself there's nothing wrong with this. But of course, if there's conflict of interest, which probably there was, then it's a different story. So that's what you're looking for if you want to find the conflict of interest. Now, normally a market maker, by the nature of his business, has a position. So there is no conflict of interest. Of course, he may prefer one bond to another. He's happy when this bond is picking up and running ahead. And he's not so happy when another bond. But I think that's not what I call a conflict of interest. But perhaps some of you can bring examples of conflict of interest which happened in this 2008 fiasco.
Don't you consider it a conflict of interest if, call it whatever, firm XYZ has other people's money under management, and they recommend that they should have in their portfolios this asset,
That would.
but they sell it?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, they prove that this is what has happened.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
That's a conflict, right?
It's just thinking.
Fraudulent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay. So I asked a question because I constantly have to remind myself in your lectures what you talk about is gold standard environment. And we're so far away from it. But it would work beautifully if we were back in that environment, wouldn't it?
Any more questions? Comments? Keith?
I would just add a comment, if no one else has anything else. The thought that's been in my mind with the interest rate structure in paper, not in gold, is when it swings lower, it's like a wrecking ball hurting anybody who has already borrowed money previously at the higher rate. The rate goes down and he loses his capital. Then when it swings the other direction, it doesn't make good on his loss. It's a wrecking ball that swings in the other direction, and it hits the submarginal, or hits the marginal producer and makes him submarginal. Then it swings back and hurts the people that have borrowed money at the higher rate. Then it swings, it's just a wrecking ball that just destroys the city in both directions. There's no balancing. It doesn't one doesn't compensate for the other.
Yeah, very good analogy. Crackers. Ball.
I've got a question, Professor.
Yes.
What do you think von Mises would have said to this synthesis? Would he have appreciated it or dismissed it?
Well, Mises had a problem. He published his first very successful and very good book, The Theory of Money and Credit, in 1912, before World War I, and he was still a very young man, in the early 20s. And he unfortunately committed himself to the quantity theory of money. And I have a feeling that in later life he realized his mistake. I mean, it's all right to say good things about the quantity theory of money, but to commit yourself so rigidly on the side of the quantity theory of money and oppose real bills, and I think this is similar. Although real bills don't enter here, but the quantity theory comes through. Can you see that the quantity theory directly or indirectly enters this model?
No.
Hmm?
No.
Well, you know, you ask me a question, I have to guess. What would a man do who has long since died if we confronted him with a new development in the theory? But knowing that he was a very fair-minded man and very modest man, with no sweeping opinions that he would sweep you out your foot with his the great respect in which you are held. I know, I've never met him, but Hugo Salinas did meet him several times, and that was his opinion of the man. His modest, his trying to encourage you, and so I would feel that he would see that point. You see? But oh yeah, theory of money and credit, he committed himself not just on the side of quantity theory of money, but also time preference being such a what's the word? Mystical power. I think he made these very strong commitments, and when time came to loosen up a little, he either was too old or just reluctant to revise his whole life work, because this went pretty deep into his life work. So I don't know the answer. What is your feeling?
My impression of von Mises is only from what you've told me about him, and you've told me that he was a very fair-minded individual, and that he would be willing to listen to interpretations of his works, which is in complete contrast to the Ludwig von Mises Institute, who deify him and woe betide anyone that contradicts his scripture, which is a big shame, really.
We confronted this when I was writing my book. Jesus was wrong, he was an idiot. Well, that doesn't sound good. And we came to that he was a product of his times. And in those times, it was inconceivable that governments would default and widows and orphans would be, cheated. And so he said, this is inconceivable, let's not even talk about it. But of course, times have changed. So he should have to live in this day and age to confront these issues, not 100 years ago or something.
Any more questions? Louis?
In the interest rates spread model there, or in everything we discussed today about the formation of the interest rate, there's no central bank.
No central bank. It's not necessary.
Necessary. And I mean, is there, what role, if any, would the state play in terms of issuing bonds to fund the debt? There was a deficit. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the gold bond in your model, not necessarily state, it could be
It's not necessary.
public, the state, the sovereign bond, it could be a private corporate bond.
Yes.
It could be any issue.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's no role for government.
Perhaps that's going a little bit too far. I'm not sure, because the government bond perhaps has a role to play. On the one hand, you are tempted to say no role. It's best if the government does not have any debt. I mean, or over a period of, say, 3 or 4 years, it should liquidate, bring back its debt to zero. And, I'm not suggesting the Keynes type of here's a word, compensatory, that's not the word. The idea is that if it's a year of recession, the government can overspend, and then, but it's incumbent on the government to retire that in the next few good years. Now, complementary financing. Complementary financing. It's not the biblical 7 lean years and 7 years of plenty, because that would be 14 years. It's a bit too long. But I tell you why it might be necessary to have, well, not perhaps necessary is too much saying, but why I think some government debt might be acceptable, assuming that the good faith is there and the government are willing to disclaim or even criticize the past actions of defaulting on their bonded debt or confiscating gold coins or any of those things which made the history of the 20th century a shameful history, which it is because of the behavior of the government. The United States Constitution is an admirable document because it says that the government has no privileged position. It should obey all. It doesn't say it in these words, but that's the meaning. The government should obey all the business laws and practices. There should be no exception. And then, of course, they started loosening it up and introduced all kinds of exceptions when the government can do this, get away with that, and so on. Issue obligations which they may renounce. This is quite all right. But there are, for instance, you would like to have a benchmark interest rate. Now, I don't have the answer to this question, but I'm putting it to you. Under this scheme, would, because there's arbitrage, it looks plausible that as a result of this arbitrage, there will be not a unique interest rate, but a unique spread between the ceiling and the floor. But would it help if the government bond also was there? I don't know. Or to take this other thing. Government bonds, now in this case gold bonds, would be very desirable assets for insurance companies, pension funds, trust funds, and so on. So I don't have a set opinion on that.
Well, I think that if you're under a gold standard, the government still has the ability to tax to whatever level they want, but they don't have the ability to print money, so they can go insolvent. So the only reason, let's say, one would buy a government bond yielding 5%, let's say a 10-year bond, over a Unilever bond, 10-year duration yielding 5%, is that the government has a stick. So they can raise taxes up 50-60% if they need to in order to... So it's sort of like a threat. You should like the government bond because we have a stick, basically, and we can tax as much as we want. But the government should still be borrowing for productive enterprise or productive purposes. So if just like Unilever would be borrowing for a particular purpose, so the government should borrow for a particular purpose as well. That's the only thing I could add in, sort of there. The only difference would be the stick that the government has taxing power-wise. They would have lost their ability to print money, and obviously they have no ability to influence the interest rate per se.
Well, you see how all these different fields overlap. Interest rate theory, taxation theory. You know, you might say that the government, so the taxes should be minimum, which sounds good, but then there are problems. So really, I don't think that we have a final theory which answers all questions. We are trying to have one, but obviously this will be a longer procedure, and there's certainly room for debate on all these questions.
Ben?
I would like to come back to your Unilever bond and the government bond, because I think this is like exactly what we know for. I mean, the Unilever bond, they are entrepreneurs, they know how to create value, and the government doesn't, and has the ability to raise taxes whenever we want. So why do we want the government bond? I mean, in a free market it would be that the government bond can't compete with the private bonds because they're so much more productive, right?
Well, if you owned a government bond, you would be sort of safer in the knowledge that if you want to get your principal back, they can raise the taxes. So,
an advantage we don't want them to have.
No, it's not, but then you're getting into a different philosophical argument. So that's all I'm saying, is that that would be the difference.
I wanted to interject a couple of things here. Somebody alluded to everything the government does, it does with a stick. That is the difference between the government and the corporation. Do you want them competing against UPS and FedEx for delivering packages, and the government has a gun and FedEx and UPS do not? Does it not create a conflict of interest if some voters own government bonds and want taxes to be raised, and everyone else does not own government bonds, but they have income that they don't want to be taxed at an increased rate? The very conflict between groups of people is because the government, by nature, what it does when it interferes in markets is take from some and give to others, break some and make others. The less that the government is doing that, the better.
I can't think of many productive reasons why a government would want to borrow. I mean, if anyone can give me a...
Well, but here is some idea. I leave it to you to decide how much merit it has. The government may need money for legitimate purposes, but raising taxes, because the government cannot borrow by constitution or something, raising taxes is really an evil. And it may be just another evil, because the other evil is the power to run deficits or go into debt, sell government bonds. Why? Because the business must know what the tax liability is to be optimum, right? I mean, if you have a business and there's a threat that the government may raise your tax rate, then this makes the business more inefficient. Because there is this big unknown. God knows they have enough unknowns, the uncertainty in nature and the economy and so on. So now if you add an additional unknown, which is the tax rate, and just give a blank check to the government that you can write your check payable to yourself by deciding what the tax level is. This is an evil. So taxing the business enterprise is an evil. The power to issue bonds is another evil. And they are kind of complementary. But you have to allow that the future is uncertain, or there could be some disaster, and the government has to step in. And for that reason, it either has to have the power to borrow or the power to change. I mean, we know debt and taxes are inevitable. But what could be perhaps avoided is changing the taxation level, which is bad for everybody, business and everybody, individuals as well. So I'm just throwing that at you. Does this have any merit or not? I'm not sure. And of course there's the other argument that business shouldn't be taxed. I mean, the shareholders of a business may be taxed. But if you, on the top of that, tax the business, this is double taxation. And that's, of course, something to avoid. And maybe with the blank prohibition on taxation on business, in addition to taxation on individual income, would solve the problem. I don't know, I haven't thought about it. But somehow, this idea of the government can just government can borrow and issue as